So I recently watched Mickey 17, a dark science fiction film that follows the 17th version of Mickey in an expendable cloning project on another planet. So I just wanted to do my overall non-spoiler review of this film. And I am going to be following my rubric, which breaks this down into 5 different categories and assigns a 1 to 5 point grade for each of these. In terms of the cinematography, I think that there are a lot of unpleasant scenes to this, as it is an R-rated movie, and I would think a lot of that really isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is intentional in terms of the mood that they want to set. But if I had to just look at it objectively, I think there are a lot of interesting visuals in this. I wouldn't say it's anything spectacular, so I would have to go a 4 out of 5 in terms of the cinematography. And then I think the plot is where you get a little bit of a mismatch. Not that there wasn't enough elements that made this movie an interesting film and an interesting draw, but I just think you have a little bit of disconnect between certain plot points and certain ideas, and maybe a little bit more could have been devoted into really taking time developing the 2 versions of Mickey. So I think that you have just a few different ideas for the plot that aren't cemented together enough. So I'd probably have to go a 3 out of 5 just because there wasn't enough in terms of bridging those ideas. But I thought the acting was a step up from the plot. I thought Robert Pattinson is really excellent in this. When the movie first started, it is a little bit hard to even recognize his voice just because I haven't heard that type of an accent from him, but I think it really does well to the character. And for someone like Robert Pattinson, I think he's really cementing himself into being a diverse actor because it doesn't feel like you're just inserting the same character in different movies. I think he really does feel authentic in this. Maybe just a small minor criticism would be between the 2 different Mickey versions. You maybe have a little bit of different styles in terms of how they speak. I would think that his voice or his accent would be the same every time. Maybe there is a little bit of deviation and that is natural within the story, but I would say for a director standpoint, that's really just to differentiate between the 2 different personality types between the 2 characters. So I wouldn't really say that's a knock on his acting at all. I would also say that Nasha's character was really excellent in this as well. So I really liked Naomi Ackie in this, but I would say that everyone else was just kind of there. There wasn't really any other standout performances for me, and I thought maybe some other characters were a little bit too over the top. Whether, again, that was the directing or the acting, I'm not too sure. So I'd have to give a 4 out of 5. And then where this really kind of dives over into the more directing or dialogue-esque into the characters, I think this is where it is a little bit weaker. I do like the overall style that this movie has, but I do think the plot points do get lost a bit and you don't tie those together as smoothly. And I do think that some of the character choices, like the basic president or the marshal character for this, just seems a little bit too over-exaggerated, and I wouldn't necessarily say that's from an acting standpoint alone. I think that's the overall vision for that character, and I would have been fine if that was maybe toned down. I do think that it makes his authoritative figure a little bit entertaining at some parts, but I think it kind of overshadows the whole movie, which is a problem. So from a directing standpoint, I would have liked to see his character be a little bit more toned down in some ways. So I think for a lot of those reasons, I'd probably have to go 3 out of 5 in terms of this. But for the overall setting or the world that this takes place in, I do think that you have pretty good world building here, whether that's just the backstory for how we got to this point to begin with, or the planet, or the kind of more space station-esque craft that they have. I think all of that is kind of set up well. It does feel pretty well lived in. I would say it almost gives a little bit of a prison-like feel, but you get a little bit more of socializing between the characters. So it even kind of feels almost like a college in terms of the dynamic between these characters and how they all live. And I think there are a lot of interesting themes that are explored just through that alone, in addition to a lot of the different cloning themes and overall humanitarian themes in terms of their relationships with the aliens. So I do think that this is is fairly well done, and I do think that you do get more of a happy ending in this, so it is a little bit more lighthearted as opposed to the more darker themes of the beginning of this film. So for that, I do really like that. I would say maybe some of the stuff with the aliens is a little bit bizarre. So I'd probably have to go a 4 out of 5 here. So adding that all up, you get a couple of 3s and 4s. So that would put this in the C- range, and I do think that is an acceptable scale for this movie. I think it is enough to pass for being an enjoyable film, but I don't really think it does anything excellent, even though it does a lot of things well in this. And I do think I would be interested in checking out the director's next film in addition to Robert Pattinson's next work. Hopefully that is The Batman Part 2, but feel free to let me know your thoughts on Mickey 17, and I'll see you later.